Welcome to another episode of Bright Headed Publishing Audiobook Book Club. I am your host, Kelly Morgan. Today I'm excited to bring you another episode of The Writer's Corner. The Writer's Corner are episodes where we have those who support authors like editors or graphic designers, promoters, marketers. And today I have a wonderful veteran editor of 16 years, Paulette K. Paulette is a professional editor and writer and avid reader. She's based in Denver, Colorado. She specializes in assisting authors with producing manuscripts that they may be proud to self-publish or confident in sending to agents. She also works with authors in the developmental stages of their books. Paulette is going into her 16th year in business. She has worked with more than 300 authors in a variety of ways during her editing career. In addition, she is a sports nut and is passionate about helping athletes, coaches, or others in the sports industry who have a story to tell. Paulette lives in Denver and loves spending time with her 3 grandsons. She also has 2 granddaughters who live in Sheridan, Wyoming. After reading all day for work, Paulette reads every afternoon for pleasure. There is likely not been a biography written that Paulette would not have read or enjoyed. I am so excited that she has decided to share her wisdom and her knowledge with us today. Welcome to the newest member of the book club, editor Paulette K. Paulette, thank you so much for being with me here today on the podcast and becoming a member of the Audiobook Book Club. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I am doing well. It's gloomy out where I am today. So this is a good day to be inside doing a podcast.
Fantastic. And I'm happy that you chose my podcast to do that on. So tell everybody, I'm really excited because, you provide a very, very valuable service to authors. And I think it's really important that people understand what it is that an editor does, what it is that you do. I like to talk about misconceptions and really help authors make good decisions and not have pitfalls as they go through the publishing process. And, a lot of people self-publish today, and there's a lot of services out there, Paulette. So bringing somebody like you to the table that's been in the industry for a very long time, I think you can bring a lot of value to the listeners. So please tell us, give us some background on, what you do, how you got in the industry, and that's where we'll start.
So Kelly, one thing, I have had a love affair with words since literally I learned to talk. My mother was not the sharing type at all, but one thing that my mother told me at some point in my life is that when I was 1 year old, I had gone so far beyond trying to say mama and dada. She told me that when I was 1 year old, I was trying to say words like chocolate and appendicitis. So the chocolate I get, the appendicitis, not so much. But that love affair with words has continued for me to this very day. And I have been an avid reader my entire life. 1 year, I must have been in about 3rd grade, and my school had a summer reading program. And I was the bookworm nerd kid who was literally at the library every other day checking out 3 new books. So I bet you I read 90 to 100 books that summer.
Wow.
So I have always been a bookworm, a nerd, whatever you want to call it. So my 2 loves when I was growing up, I had quite an unhappy childhood, But the two things that were my salvation were books and sports. So if I was not inside reading a book, I was outside playing sports. So I come by my profession honestly, but in particular, how I got started in 2005, there's a group in Denver called the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers. And the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers has a conference every September. And in conjunction with the conference, the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers has a writing contest. So that year, somebody at the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers put out a request for judges for the writing contest. And it just so happened that I had to have a little minor surgery that summer. So I said to myself, you can be a judge. How hard could it be? So whoever it was sent me 10 manuscripts or whatever. And somehow, of their own volition, my fingers just picked up a pen and started marking up these manuscripts. And I don't know whether the authors wanted me to be doing that or whatever, but I scored the manuscripts, sent them back to where they were supposed to go, and just knew after that short few weeks in my life, I just knew what I was put on this earth to do. So it was about 6 months later, so it was about this time of year in 2006 that I was working on my first ever manuscript as a book editor. So this today marks, I'm going into my 16th year of business. So I have been editing books for 16 years. So I'm quite experienced.
So when you say editing, do you edit all genres? Do you stick to, nonfiction versus fiction, or do you work with a variety of different authors that, write different types of books?
So Kelly, I have edited just probably coincidentally about 50% nonfiction and 50% fiction over the course of my career. When I say nonfiction, typically nonfiction books are memoir, they're business books, sometimes they're how-to books, self-help books. Fiction, I've probably edited every genre known to man. It was funny, several years ago, probably 2010-ish time frame, a girl found me maybe on LinkedIn or something, and she emailed me, and and then she called me, and she was kind of like real gingerly asking me a question, and she kind of said, "Do you edit erotica?" And I said, "Of course I do." So anything from science fiction, romance, sweeping sagas, erotica. One thing that authors might want to know is that if the editor is competent, a comma is either correct or incorrect regardless of which genre you're writing. So there are genres that I enjoy more than others, but specifically for what I do, it doesn't matter which genre you write, because, if you've overused the word beautiful in your manuscript, I'm going to flag that for you regardless of which genre you're writing in. If you have thrown in 2 million commas that don't belong there, I'm going to delete them. If you haven't used commas where they belong, I'm going to insert them for you. So, regardless of which book I'm working on that day, there is some benefit to me there. So I just think that's really fun.
So, in editing, I have learned that there are different types of editors. And so I know, are you the type of editor that when you're putting the comma in the right place and you're putting the period in the right place, are you also helping the writer develop holes in the story or helping them in the developmenting of the story process? Or are you just looking at the grammar, the commas, the periods?
So Kelly, that's a question that I get all the time. It seems like a lot of authors think when I say I'm a book editor, that's exactly what they think. They think I'm working on their grammar and their punctuation, that's it, and then I'm done. And one of the other things that many authors don't realize, or that is confusing, is that there are many words associated with the editing profession. So people throw out words like developmental edit, copy edit, substantive edit. Well, I do everything for an author. I decided when I first started doing this, if you go to a developmental editor, which is somebody who theoretically helps you develop your manuscript, that could be $3,000 to $5,000. Then you go to a copy editor, another $3,000. Then you go to a substantive editor for another $3,000, and then you go to a proofreader for another $2,000. And pretty soon you're looking at $12,000 to $15,000 for your, little 50,000 word book project, and that just didn't make sense to me. So I call what I do a comprehensive edit, which means that when I go through your manuscript and you get it back from me, you have all of the help that you need to publish a high quality product. So for example, if I'm working on nonfiction, almost all the time, authors have holes in the information. And that is just due to the fact either that since the author is so close to their material, they get to a place where they can't see the forest for the trees, or it's a case of their brain just getting ahead of their fingers. And what's going along in their brain, their fingers can't keep up, so they miss something when they're typing. And then in specifically when it comes to fiction, I find frequently that authors don't do enough developing their characters. In other words, if you tell me that the character has black hair and that's all I know about the character, I'm going to come away from that book and I'm going to feel gypped. So when I say that I do a comprehensive edit, I do everything that the author needs. So I do a lot of developmental stuff if the author needs it. And what that might look like in the manuscript is I'll put a note right in the manuscript that might say, on page 12, it says that these people drove to town, and then on page 32, it says that these people drove into the country. So that's an inconsistency, and you either need to tell the reader when exactly it was that they drove into town, or somehow reconcile the inconsistency. So I work with developmental issues. I work with consistency issues, both in terms of the story and in terms of the actual words chosen. So a lot of times people will capitalize a word in their manuscript on page 16, and then you get to page 92 and the word is not capitalized. So I do a lot of work in terms of consistency, both for concepts and the text in the manuscript, and then actual spellings of words, And yes, I do work a lot with grammar and punctuation. I do a substantial amount of work on overused words. We call those word echoes. And again, that goes back to the have you used beautiful 5,000 times in your 300-page manuscript. So, overall, I give the authors all of the help that they need for one flat fee. I just charge a flat fee. I don't charge by the hour. I don't charge by the page. I don't charge by the word, because how do you do that? If an editor's charging by the word and, they've already read all of the words on page 27, and then you get to page, 105, and you have to go back to page 27, how do you charge for that? Do you charge for reading each of those words again? I have no idea. So I charge a flat fee. I don't want my authors to have any surprises, either during the editing process or when I have completed the work on their manuscript. So if I tell you that the editing of your manuscript is $2,000, that's all you will ever pay me.
That $2,000 is you're going to deliver a finished product to them.
Yes. So typically, I will have an author send me their complete manuscript so that I can review it, and I base my fee on the total word count of the manuscript and how much work the project needs. So if I tell you that your fee is $2,000, then I have a whole entire process which I explain to the author when I do a sample edit for authors at no charge. And then when I send the sample edit back to the author, I include like a 12-page informational letter that lays out in great detail my process for editing their book. So once they get their edited manuscript and the informational letter back, then I do the work on their manuscript. And like I said, the initial fee, if and I'm just making this up because I custom tailor each fee and everything I do to each individual author. So nobody could ever quote me on this. I'm just making this up. But just pretend that your manuscript was 70,000 words and the fee for that was $2,000. So then I send your manuscript back to you, and authors always have revisions to make. So authors make revisions to their manuscripts, and then I always leave it up to the author in terms of whether they want to send me a second draft of their manuscript. I highly encourage that because that's the best way for me to help authors make sure that their manuscript is as clean as possible. But if authors choose not to send me the second draft of their manuscript, then they just publish it and off they go. But if authors do want to send me the second draft of their manuscript, then I typically charge half of whatever the original editing fee was to go back through a second draft. So that's one thing that authors need to know, is that even book editors need to eat, right? So if a book editor tells you that she's going to charge you, half a penny a word, that's an editor that you don't want to work with, because those kinds of editors, they're not paying themselves a living wage. I mean, even book editors need to eat, right? So anybody who is not charging you a living wage to edit your manuscript, those people, if this is their hobby, they're doing it for 5 hours a week, they're incompetent, And, I know a lot of people think that sounds harsh because some editors might do this for a hobby or might do it part-time. But really, in my opinion, authors want to work with an editor who takes their work as seriously as the author does. This is my full-time job. This is all I do every day.
There's a lot of misconceptions out there about editors, self-publishing, and how you can overcome those pitfalls, those misconceptions. You've been doing this for a long time. I'm sure authors have come to you and had misconceptions about what you do, and you just laid that out for us. But what misconceptions do you see within the industry as an editor and watching the industry evolve as it has over the past 16 years, where there was no Amazon 16 years ago, as there was no Instagram or Facebook or all these other social media platforms that you can promote your book on? And what would you tell somebody who has never been published, who comes to you and says, edit my book, and once I get it edited, then what do I do?
Okay, so one of the first misconceptions that authors have typically is they think they're going to send me their book, I'm going to send it back to them a week later, and then 1 week after that, they're going to have a published book in their hands. Well, I have had to disabuse more authors than I can count of that notion, because typically just the first round of edits of a book is 4 to 6 weeks. Then the author has to go back and make her revisions. And most of my authors do have full-time jobs. So if they only have evenings and weekends to be working on the revisions may well take them 2 or 3 months. Then if they send the book back for a second round of edits, we would probably be looking at about 4 weeks. Typically, authors, again, think that, at the end of next week, they're going to have a published book in their hands. No, that's not true. It's probably 6 to 9 months from the time you approach an editor till the time you have a published book in your hands. It takes that long. Publishing a book is a process. It's not something that happens overnight. And so if authors take one thing away from this podcast, they need to know that this is not something that just happens overnight. They are going to have to live through the process and embrace the process if they want to have a quality book when they're holding the published book in their hands. The other misconception that authors have, Kelly, is that people are not even quite sure what self-publishing means. So true self-publishing means that the author hires her own editor. She hires her own book designer. And when we talk about book design, we're talking about both cover design and interior design. And then if an author wants to put their book put their book up on Amazon, that's different than do you send the book to the printer after it's all ready to go. So people misconstrue the meanings of the words publisher and printer all the time. So if you're self-publishing, you are not using a publisher, you are the publisher. But in order to get a printed book in your hand, you need to have a printer print your book for you. So the other half of self-publishing is that there are many, many millions of companies, and there are more coming out of the woodwork every day, These companies call themselves publishing companies, and what these publishing companies do is separate authors from their money. In the industry, we call them vanity presses. And the reason for that is because authors are paying these companies to, quote, publish, unquote, their books for them. If you're going through a traditional New York publisher, you don't pay the publisher. Back in the old days, traditional publishers used to pay the authors in advance. They would do the marketing for authors, blah, blah, blah. Nowadays, an advance might be $2,000. And even if you do go with a traditional New York publisher, probably 95 to 99% of the marketing is up to the author. We are long past the days where publishers are going to send authors on a book tour. Like literally, unless you're John Grisham, if you're a first-time author, you are marketing your book by yourself.
Another misconception about what that means, right? How do I do that? And I think what you're saying, Paulette, is that authors, if you're going to self-publish, you have to be an entrepreneur, right?
That's exactly right. Because when you self-publish your own book, you have to wear many hats. So the first hat that you have to wear is obviously that of author. So once your manuscript is done, you can hand the manuscript off to the editor, and then you can hand the manuscript off to the book designer. But during that time, then you have to transition to being what we in the industry call the publisher, because you are in charge of your own book. So that means that you have just become the publisher of your book. So first you're author, then you're publisher. Once your book is published, and again, we need to make a distinction between the words. So you became the publisher of your book, but you sent the book to a printer so that you have a book to hold in your hands. So once you have the published book in your hands, then the next hat that you wear is that of marketer, because somehow you have to get the word out about your book to people who want to buy your book. One of the misconceptions is that if you put your book up on Amazon, suddenly you're going to sell 12 million copies and you're going to become the most famous author in the world. No, sorry, honey, it doesn't work that way, right? I mean, it's your job as the author and the publisher to alert the reading public that your book is out there. So if you're the author, the publisher, the marketer, then maybe if you're writing nonfiction, you're using the book to take with you on your speaking tour. So then you become speaker. So yes, it would be very easy to lump all of those things under the umbrella of entrepreneur.
A lot of the things that you said, I have to admit to myself, and I'll admit to all the listeners, because I think I've already put it out there, guilty as charged, right? Guilty in thinking I'm going to put my book on Amazon and have, be the number one bestseller. Did not work out that way. Guilty that I thought I was going to be on book tour by now. Did not work out that way. Guilty in not understanding what a publisher was versus a printer, and that I really had to be an entrepreneur. Guilty of being taken by a vanity press, right? Guilty of all of these things because I was a complete novice when I stepped into the world. All I knew is that I wanted to be a published author. And seeing my book in print was the most fabulous thing that ever happened to me. I did not know that all of these other things were necessary. And I wish I would have known, but I take that back. I'm glad things worked out the way they did. Otherwise, we would not be sitting here talking to one another. So even though a lot of awful things happened to me and I lost money and things didn't work out the way that I thought they would, things have actually worked out even better because not only am I gaining now all of this knowledge, I also have met the most fascinating and interesting and wonderful people, and I have this wonderful podcast to help others not go down that same rabbit hole of being taken advantage of and truly understanding what it means when you go to self-publish your book.
I can't work for free because then I don't eat and my 5 grandchildren don't get a birthday present. But, to the extent that I can help authors figure out where to go from there, I really see that as part of my job. That's part of my job that I don't get paid for. Again, if authors could just know to talk to somebody in the industry who will help them avoid the pitfalls of paying a vanity press thousands of dollars. Publishing a book is hard enough as it is. Like we talked about a little while ago, you have to wear so many hats. It's hard. Some days you're going to be so frustrated that you don't know what to do with yourself. You will love it when you have a published book to hold in your hands, but getting there it's challenging, it's time consuming, it's hard.
Somebody had told me that they thought that the self-publishing market was oversaturated. Do you feel that the market is oversaturated?
So, that's an excellent point. There's always going to be millions and millions of books published every year. And part of the reason for that is because there are as many tastes, as many likes in books as there are people running around out there, right? So not every person likes a Western, or not every person likes a romance. So if you're writing science fiction, you have an audience too, right? So I don't think that the self-publishing market is oversaturated. The marketplace is absolutely flooded with self-published junk. So if you don't want to go down the ignominious road of publishing junk, you absolutely need to work with a professional editor. And to that point, one gal, I met one gal, she was really young. She was maybe 22, 23 when I met her. And, we did the whole sample edit thing. And she ended up telling me that she was not going to work with me because she wanted to work with somebody who would use Google Docs. And I told her, I said, that doesn't make any sense, because if you're working with an editor, the editor needs a fixed manuscript to be working from. In other words, you can't have somebody going in there and making constant changes to the manuscript, because then the editor does not have a document to work from. So that was the first thing. The second thing is, then she ended up going with a vanity press. It was called Black Card. I will give Black Card a black mark on your podcast. It's my personal feeling that if your book is well written, you will have an audience for it. But what I do think is that the market is saturated with self-published books that have not been professionally edited, that are not worth somebody reading the first page. So, again, it's critical that authors work with a competent professional editor if they do not want to put junk into the marketplace. If you don't care, one of the things that I always have to tell my authors is that once you get 3 bad reviews, there's nothing in the world you can do about it. You are stuck with that for the rest of your life. That's what you get when you work with a vanity press.
I've even spoke to editors that have basically come out and said, I can edit your book. I run it through Grammarly. And I can run my book through Grammarly. That's not an edit, right? But I've had people say this, to me, and I've had other authors in my doing the podcast who have come out and said things to me like that. So it's mind blowing how much bad information is out there, and it's also disheartening how many people, like you said, are in this just to simply separate you from your money. Because somebody who has written a book, I put a lot into it. It can be incredibly discouraging to think that somebody really thinks it's a good book and that they want to quote unquote publish you, but actually what they're looking at is getting a hold of your money. And when you figure that out, guess what? Money's gone, book not published. And then you wonder, why am I even doing this? So, Paulette, I thank you for your knowledge and coming on the podcast and willing to share all of this information. If somebody wanted to work with you, how would they get a hold of you?
The easiest way I prefer a phone call. So my phone number is 303-517-7340. If I have a phone conversation with somebody right at the outset, we can talk about time frames. I can help them acclimate to the realities of the publishing business, and that is much easier to do via a phone call than it is for me to have to spend the time typing the answers to 52,000 questions on an email. But if authors just want to send me their manuscript, all they have to do is put sample edit in the subject line. And I typically have sample edits back to authors within about 48 hours. So they can contact me at my email address, which is Paulette@platinumeditinggroup.com. Platinum Editing Group is all one word, and the name of my business is Platinum Editing Group. They can find me on Facebook. They can find me on LinkedIn. But again, I really prefer a phone call just because that's the easiest way for me to have an opening conversation with authors so that they can really get a handle on how the publishing business works.
That's fantastic. I appreciate you, like I said, coming onto the podcast. I always like anybody that I speak with to leave us with some words of wisdom, inspiration, or knowledge. And what can you leave us with today?
So I will tell you a teeny bit of a short story. My son was a rebel, to put it as nicely as possible, when he was a teenager. And I was working, and I was also in college. I actually graduated from college when I was 40. So I had my daughter was in college. I had my son at home with me. And I walked in from work or school one day, and he was sitting in the living room at his music equipment. And he said, "I'm bored. There's nothing to do around here." And I said, "Honey, read a book. Reading can take you places. Reading is fabulous." And he said to me, "Reading is stupid. Who would ever want to read a book? Reading is stupid." And I had no comeback for that, right? But fast forward 20, however many years, my son is actually going to be 40 this year. And my son is now the proud possessor of both a college degree. He graduated from college summa cum laude with a 4.0 GPA. He immediately went on to get his master's degree, and he now has a master's degree in philosophy. And so at some point in the intervening 20 years, he discovered that reading is not stupid. That's why I do what I do.
Fantastic. Paulette, thank you so much for being here with me today. All of Paulette's links, her website, her email address, her phone number, everything will be in the podcast description. Paulette, thank you for your time and your graciousness to share your knowledge. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kelly. This was so much fun.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Bright Headed Publishing Audiobook Book Club. I have been your host, Kelly Morgan. We just wrapped up with 16-year veteran editor Paulette K. Paulette came on and shared with us all good information about editing, the editing process, and what authors should look out for, and she even covered misconceptions. We thank Paulette for being a member of the book club. If you are someone like Paulette who supports authors, you're an editor, graphic designer, or marketer, we would love to have you as a member of the book club and have you on the podcast. All you have to do is email me at brightheadedpublishing@gmail.com. Again, brightheadedpublishing@gmail.com. All the links to reach Paulette are in the podcast description, so if you want to reach out to her, you'll be able to do that. Next week, I have another author coming through. Thank you for listening. And as always, keep writing.